Oxalates, word most of us have not heard. You can really wreck your health on sweet potatoes. Dark chocolate, tea, and things we're trusting to be safe. It's very clear that oxalate would promote dementia.
Sally Norton, a world-renowned expert in oxalates.
The best-selling author of Toxic Superfoods.
Your healthy diet might be making you sick, and it starts with plants.
Oxalate crystals are found in this place associated with Parkinson's disease. 80% of us have it in our thyroid gland. There's a huge amount of it in bones. It's all invisible and hard to see. Kidney stone is the classic sign of oxalate toxicity. It's probably an end-stage sign. So if you already have kidney stones, your system is overloaded with oxalate. The reason I needed a tonsillectomy at age 5 was because of oxalate poisoning already. And then at age 12, I started getting arthritis and back pain. It turns out that all of those things, the arthritis, the foot problems, the fatigue, was my healthy diet. I was a healthy eater. Most of the oxalate that ends up in your body is from foods and from vitamin C supplementation. The body has no way to metabolize it or break it down or detoxify it. As you're removing oxalic acid, this metal chelator, you need more calcium, you need more electrolytes, you need more salts. If you don't, you could end up with arrhythmias and end up in the emergency room with what feels like a pending stroke or heart attack. Why people always say spinach and kale and spinach when they're talking oxalates, I don't understand.
Do you think a carnivore diet for 90 days is a good place to start?
Probably not.
Before we start, I have a favor to ask. On this health podcast, it's our mission to spread the message about root cause healing. And that means that the food that we eat has the power to heal disease. And you can help with this mission by hitting the subscribe button. Because we know that Big Food and Big Pharma, they're most likely not going to help with this mission, but you can change that. And over the last year, we have grown to over 200,000 subscribers. But I think we know that there are millions more people that could benefit from hearing our message. Thank you. Sally, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Now, you wrote a groundbreaking book, Toxic Superfoods, which goes against everything we've been told about what is healthy to eat. And something simple as a morning smoothie, chocolate, and even tea can cause millions of people to have chronic inflammation, metabolic disease, and unexplained fatigue, even when everything else is perfectly normal. So in this episode, Sally is going to share her decades of experience and talk about a toxin, oxalates, and what foods that we need to avoid that are high in oxalates that we're probably eating every day. And most importantly, the safe way to remove oxalates from your body without having excessive oxalate dumping. But Sally, my first question, why is too many oxalates so dangerous in the body?
Well, maybe the worst problem with the oxalates in the body is that the body tries to hide it, and you can't always tell that it's there undermining your physiology and the structures of your body. So you can carry on exposing yourself to a problematic compound for years. And then when it finally surfaces, you have no idea that it's your healthy foods that are connected to your symptoms. So usually what happens when you start feeling poorly is you would add more of the foods that are causing your problem. And you get stuck in this loop of looking for answers, and you think you got an answer for a while, and then that doesn't work, and you end up wasting a lot of your life on this frustrating path looking for health. That is really unfortunate and unnecessary, and it's there because of our ignorance about oxalate.
So I wanted to talk about oxalates, but I think people might not know, what is an oxalate? What is oxalate in the body? What does it do?
Oxalates, word most of us have not heard. And it's ubiquitous. Plants make it, soil funguses make it, polluted air makes it. It's in our environment, and it's in a lot of the foods that we think are super healthy, like beets, beet greens, spinach, nuts, blackberries, kiwi, dark chocolate, tea, and things we're trusting to be safe, and not only safe, beneficial, when in fact this has this undermining factor in them, this high oxalate content. So oxalate is a word, or oxalates is a word that encapsulates a number of chemical forms of oxalic acid, which is the parent compound. Oxalic acid is this very small molecule, just 2 carbons with 4 oxygens. That's a pretty heavy ratio of oxygen to carbon. And that little thing is the end product of oxidation. The body has no way to metabolize it or break it down or detoxify it. It's an end product of metabolism as well. So you can generate a little bit of oxalate in your metabolism. But most of the oxalate that ends up in your body is from foods and from vitamin C supplementation. That's another one. That's what we call a precursor molecule. Vitamin C degenerates into oxalate in the body. So oxalic acid has this negative charge on it, either 1 or 2. Drops a proton has 2. That negative charge chelates or grabs metals like calcium, magnesium, iron, you name it. Metals connect with oxalate. And so oxalic acid and a metal together, that's an oxalate salt. They can get together and they can stick really hard and tight. That's called an insoluble salt, like calcium oxalate. Or they can, if they're in the water, they can just stay as an oxalate ion, the oxalic acid ion. So that little ion, very easily floating in water, you absorb it from the food you're eating and it gets into your bloodstream and starts causing problems because it's so reactive, and it starts messing with electrolytes and damages your immune cells, your vascular system, your liver, uses up glutathione because it's creating oxidative stress in cells. That oxidative stress and cellular damage turns up inflammation, and that combination of oxidative stress and inflammation wrecks how the mitochondria work and the other structures of the cells, and starts undermining your basic physiology in ways that are subtle because you have lots of cells and it's different in each person. It also seems to get attracted to glands and connective tissues and gets stuck there. It gets stuck in areas of the body that has inflammation, where the cells are turning over because you got to get new cells routinely. And then it starts accumulating and causing not only dysfunction in the cells. So, say in connective tissue or fascia, you've got chondrocytes that are supposed to organize and maintain and make your connective tissues. Well, if they're struggling, they're low energy, they have trouble doing what they need to do. And your maintenance of those tissues goes way down because of the low energy, poor cell reproduction. But you also get these deposits and various physiologic effects that aren't well characterized in the medical literature yet, but it's very clear when there's a lot of oxalate hanging around in connective tissues and other tissues, you create other forms of calcification. So you can have calcium oxalate crystals hanging in your fascia and your tendons and your joints and your bone marrow and your bones, in your thyroid gland, in your eyes, in your brain tissues. And that being there seems to help promote other forms of calcification. So you can end up with calcified, stiff fascia and tendons and end up with frozen shoulder and neck pain and arthritis and all kinds of issues with your connective tissue, as well as your basic physiology could. There's evidence in the literature, and I see it in some of my clients, that oxalate's contributing to the prevalence of obesity and primarily insulin resistance and diabetes. It's messing up how these receptors are working. So the cell receptors that are be able to bring in the glucose and make use of that energy are not working well.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to talk about oxalates in the bigger picture of our overall health, because there's a lot of talk about insulin and insulin resistance, especially because we have an obesity epidemic. But when we eat these certain superfoods, these healthy foods, they form oxalates. So oxalates are crystals that form in your body, and they can go, as Sally mentioned, into tissues, cause inflammation. I wanted to focus on superfoods and these healthy foods that cause the oxalates, because people are eating them every day. Let's talk about a superfood and what it is.
Superfood is an invented concept. That's a wonderful marketing tool. And you can give people confidence with this label, this healthy glow, and label something as such, and sell magazines and sell blenders and sell supplements and give people, a little rabbit's foot of good luck for health, without necessarily having real science behind it.
So a superfood is something that is marketed to you. So for example, a green smoothie. Let's talk about that, which has spinach, which has almond flour and all these different things in it. Why is that so bad for somebody? Sounds healthy.
Well, with oxalates, you have a little tolerance for consuming some oxalate because your body makes some oxalate. It's part of nature. So your body's familiar with oxalic acid and the oxalates that it forms. And it's designed to handle a little bit. The problem with that smoothie is that smoothie has 8 or 10 times the amount you're designed to handle. So that is a truly dangerously toxic amount of oxalate in it. And you've blended it up. So it's now in this kind of broken up, liquidized form that makes the oxalate that much easier and quickly absorbed into the body. So you can really nail your gut and then your bloodstream and the circulating immune cells One interesting study done fairly recently, I think it was published in 2021, showed that 40 minutes after a green smoothie made with just fruits and spinach, which had only about 700 milligrams of oxalate in it, showed that the circulating immune cells in the blood of those subjects were damaged, putting out pro-inflammatory cytokines and no longer able to handle bacteria. So they could no longer work as antibacterial immune cells because they themselves were damaged from a spinach smoothie in only 40 minutes. Now you have to know that absorption from the body, that is materials in your food, and the amount of time it takes for them to get into the blood can occur throughout the digestive tract, from the stomach, the upper small intestines, and that whole process is a 24-hour process. But already in just 40 minutes, you see damage in the bloodstream to your immune system.
So potentially people that have immune system problems, autoimmune diseases, could oxalates be affecting that or making it worse?
Definitely. And in that short run, you would recognize that chronic sinus infections and other kinds of chronic infections that you keep getting over and over again is because your immune system isn't working well. And the mucosal barrier that's supposed to protect your tissues that tend to get these infections is struggling. And the immune cells that are there are struggling. And then you've got this crystal collection in your system, which continues to challenge the immune system because it's the immune system's job to bury those crystals, which are very harmful to the local tissue, so that they don't harm the local tissue. So you have these processes like the formation of these balls, like micro tumors, where the immune cells come in and they end up wrapping around the crystal trying to get rid of it, and they have trouble with it. So they end up wrapping it in dead white blood cells, or the immune cells come by and they extrude their DNA and create this, what's called a net. Again, trying to encapsulate and capture those crystals so that they're less reactive to the local tissue. So that's a lot of work on the immune cells. But later, when the body's trying to fix your thyroid gland and your tissues and maintain them, it's going to try again to deal with those crystals. And again and again. And those little crystals are sitting there just waiting to turn on the immune system. Well, this over agitation of the immune system over and over and over again potentially leads to all kinds of things we call autoimmune diseases.
There's so many different things that oxalates can affect, and we're going to talk about signs and symptoms, and so that you know whether you have a problem with oxalates. But I wanted to turn attention to you, Sally, because you've had an extraordinary health journey. Oxalates nearly, I guess, ruined your life. Can you share about your story and what happened to you?
Yeah, in retrospect, those of us who've undone this toxicity, there's a reversal process. And you look back in retrospect and you start seeing more and more earlier and earlier in life. And I wonder if the reason I needed a tonsillectomy at age 5 was because of oxalate poisoning already. And then at age 12, I started getting arthritis and back pain. And then when I was 19, I had this foot problem that turned into nearly a 10-year saga of problems needing painkillers, crutches, wheelchairs, foot surgery, poor recovery from foot surgery, another 30 years of foot issues. In the meantime, all kinds of autoimmune aches and pains, really bad arthritis in my 20s and so on, and lots of fatigue and trouble with brain function, focus, and so on. So it turns out that all of those things, the arthritis, the foot problems, the fatigue, was my healthy diet. I was a healthy eater as a little kid. Rhubarb is a classic high oxalate food, and my mom had it behind the garage. I love the rhubarb dessert that she made all summer and early spring and through the summer. And my sister and I used to play with that rhubarb as little kids and feed it to each other. And that just should not be allowed. You should not do that to your child. And I've learned so much too from my clients and followers how much oxalates are probably affecting early childhood development and our tendency to get childhood illnesses, our struggle with learning and behavior, little things with babies, cradle cap, fussiness, tantrums, things like this. This is neurotoxicity, which is not something we've touched on yet, but as a chelator of electrolytes and a destroyer of cell membranes and so on, oxalate is quite neurotoxic. And so it's going to affect the neurodevelopment of children if they're high in oxalate. So a lot of us who are really in tough shape probably started having issues early in life, and then we were given antibiotics and so on, and that just added to the susceptibility to the toxic effects of the oxalate.
We're seeing a lot of increase in dementia worldwide. There's a lot of Alzheimer's. So neurotoxicity, how does oxalates affect the brain? This is a massive deal that not many people talk about.
No, and a lot of researchers aren't looking at it either. It's the science there is thin, but there's plenty of people saying, oxalate crystals are found in this place associated with Parkinson's disease and are probably related to Parkinson's disease, probably related to dementia. If you look at the mechanistic and the basic science on the effects on the nerves, it's very clear that oxalate would promote dementia and all kinds of other neurodivergences, including just mood problems, apathy, loss of motivation, tendency to anxiety and panic attacks, a tendency to depression. I've been blown away by how many people have come to me to say when they took oxalates out of their diet, that took the anxiety and the panic attacks and the misery, the emotional misery out of their lives.
Now, if you feel that you have a buildup of oxalates in the body, you need to follow a low oxalate diet. And Sally, later in the episode, will talk more about the foods that you need to eat and some foods that you need to avoid. But when you make this transition to a low oxalate diet, you might experience some side effects like fatigue, headache, and some nausea. And that's quite normal at the beginning. So what you can do is to add in some electrolytes. You could add in some good quality salt, especially to your meals and also to your water. But if this doesn't work and you still have these side effects, I would highly recommend that you lean on an electrolyte supplement. And a great electrolyte supplement is Element, because Element contains the right amount of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. The great thing about Element is that it doesn't contain any nasties. There's no preservatives or additives. And I love to add the raw, unflavored option to my morning coffee. My husband, he loves the chocolate salt that he adds to his coffee. So if you'd like to try Element, they are offering my viewers this free sample pack on every order. So you're going to get 8 single servings of Element to try for free. So if you want this, just head to drinkelement.com/5minutebody. That's drinklmnt.com/5minutebody to get this free sample pack. And thanks to Element for sponsoring this video. Oxalates themselves are not bad. Too much is bad. So what is a normal amount that the human body can handle?
Well, it's variable from person to person. So a very unuseful metric that's used in toxicology is fatality, how much it takes to kill you. And that range is huge, anywhere from 3 to 5 on the low end grams of oxalate up to 15 to kill you. So if I gave one person 3 grams, I might be able to kill them. 3 grams would be 3 spinach smoothies. Some other person might need 15 spinach smoothies before I could kill them. So that would be an acute dose in the same day. But if you spread out those 15 smoothies over 15 days, the body is busy trying to manage that excess toxicity and doing the best that it can. And it has mechanisms that aren't well studied of how it's handling the oxalate, but primarily it's holding on to the oxalate to protect your circulating immune cells, your capillaries, your critical organs, and especially your kidneys, because the kidneys are the organ with whose main job it is to get rid of it. They're designed to handle oxalate. They're designed to handle about 25 milligrams of oxalate a day. And if 12 of them are coming from your metabolism, the other 12 is coming from your diet. Your metabolism plus your vitamin C on the 12. So you can have 12 milligrams of oxalate in your body from your food, which when you account for how much in your food is actually moving into your bloodstream, that depends on your gut health. So if you have wide open leaky gut and malabsorption syndrome, you might absorb 50% of what you consume. So then you would be only allowed to have 50 milligrams of oxalate a day, which is about 3 or 5 spinach leaves. It's like not so much, or, 1 handful of almonds and you're done. But if you have really great health and really great physiology and your cells are great and your gut is great, you can probably have 200 milligrams. That's about a half a spinach salad.
Okay, and the great thing about your book, Toxic Superfoods, is that you spell out and you give some information around how much oxalates are in certain foods. And we're going to talk about that today. Let's talk about signs and symptoms so somebody could just think, right, I have a problem with oxalates.
Well, Where it starts showing up is really different in every person. So you want to think about these major systems that it affects, your nervous system. So there could be a whole set of neurological things like the learning that we talked about, or headaches, um, poor coordination, dropping things, moodiness, that kind of thing. Mood stuff could be. So there's the nerve part. There's the stomach thing. A lot of people will have digestive issues because of the oxalates. And once you have digestive issues, that makes you more susceptible to the oxalates. So if there's any kind of indigestion, poor gut function, irritable bowel syndrome, problems with rectal control, like either fecal incontinence or serious constipation, bloating, tremors and twitches. Hiccups are an example of a neurotoxic tremor and twitch. When the nerves are toxic, you get these muscle spasms. And sometimes that might look like fibromyalgia. Sometimes that looks like arrhythmias, looks like hiccups and so on, or bloating and belching. And poor dysbiosis is another kind of muscle spasms where things are not coordinated well. So that's sort of the neurotoxicity. And a lot of things that we think of are of muscles or digestion might be the neurotoxicity piece causing it, because nerves are controlling these tissues. And even hypertension, because again, if you've got spasms, you can have vascular spasms, and that's known, and vasculitis, inflammation in the vascular system, would give you some hypertension. So if you have periodic hypertension, that might be a sign. Then there's the aches and pains. You got achy joints, achy muscles, a tendency to stiffness and just yuckiness. The neck is a popular spot where that might happen. And the fingers, shoulders, frozen shoulder, hip issues, clicking joints. And then there's the urinary tract. If you're getting up at night to pee, that's probably because oxalates are irritating your bladder, and the bladder is like, get this out of here, and wakes you up to get rid of this high oxalate urine. So nighttime urination, frequent urination, having to run to the bathroom and not peeing much, incontinence, these are all things that can be affecting bladder function. And of course, kidney stone is the classic sign of oxalate toxicity. It's probably an end stage sign. So if you already have kidney stones, your system is overloaded with oxalate.
What about bladder stones?
Yes. Bladder stones, even probably prostate stones, saliva stones, these can all be oxalate.
So you mentioned arthritis, stenosis, which you had.
Yes, still have.
That's the thing, like, it's so sad with your story because you have to manage all of these symptoms that you have, even to how old are you now? Sorry.
60 and finally feeling good.
So let's now move on to worst oxalate foods. This is the fun part. So let's start off with greens. There's 3 of them.
Spinach, chard, and beet greens. And then there's sorrel, which isn't that common in North America, but it's used in other countries. But really, the ones that you see are these spinach, chard, and Swiss chard and beet greens are thrown in these salad mixes. So you'll go for what you think of salad mix, but half of it can be these greens.
And then the other greens there's lots of other greens, they're perfectly fine. People can eat that in unlimited quantity.
Pretty much. Yeah. Even kale. Kale gets hooked as a high oxalate food, and everyone talks about kale. And compared to spinach, chard, and beet greens, kale ain't got nothing. Really, it's tiny. But kale can be 3 times or 4 times what's in romaine lettuce or in cabbage, which are so little, almost nothing. So kale, you might get 12, even maybe 15, depending on the variety of kale, milligrams. But with spinach, per serving, you're much closer to 900 to 1,000 milligrams. So you can see, like, they're not in the same ballpark. Why people always say spinach and kale and spinach when they're talking oxalates, I don't understand. That's one reason we got the data book coming out. Maybe people will start looking at the oxalate data, and it's in my book, but this is straight. Like, this is the data that shows you. Quit accusing kale. Kale has lots of reasons you don't want to eat it. Kind of like, to me, it's like eating hay, but
Well, I think people that are following a carnivore diet, as do I, mostly carnivore diet, don't really love vegetables. Some people love their vegetables, but, not really a fan of kale.
I was a huge vegetable fan, huge, but not a big kale eater. Oh, my whole life, every meal had 3 vegetables and a salad. I'd come home from a busy day at work and put together this magnificent meal. Really into vegetables, growing them organically. Loved vegetables from a time I was a kid. one of the stupidest things I ever did.
Well, that's the interesting thing is that when you love vegetables so much and you think that they're so healthy for you, but some of them can be as bad as ultra processed foods. It's very shocking to say that, but they can cause so much damage to your body.
That is a very upsetting thing for people to hear. They're like, oh, well, vegetables are bad and all of everything else is bad. There's nothing to eat. And like, it really upsets people and you can't blame them, but most people who are pigging out on vegetables are not pigging out on Twinkies. So it's two different audiences, but both are prone to having too many potatoes. People who eat processed foods are eating French fries, potato chips, tater tots, and you name it, all kinds of potato concoctions. Potatoes are a big problem. I recently put out a video on my YouTube channel of a man who was not into healthy vegetables, just kind of a regular guy eating regular food and really into French fries, especially when he was a teenager. And now in his mid 70s, he's dumping oxalates on a carnivore diet. Probably a lot of that got started set up when he was 18, holding on to that with no obvious symptoms except he had obesity and he had gut problems and, he was running to the bathroom and for years. And now he's got the stuff out of his system and he's trim and fit and is in his mid 70s.
So we're going to talk about how to not have the oxalate dumping, because that's the radical dumping of oxalates, how to excrete them nicely so that you don't have all the nasty side effects. But that was another worst oxalate food, which is potatoes. So roots, so potatoes, sweet potatoes, and you mentioned the Lay's potato chips, which people just love, which is weird. Next one, peanuts.
Yeah, just to put an underscore on sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes have this holy halo. You can really wreck your health on sweet potatoes. Don't buy into the idea that I thought they were low allergy and wonderfully safe and like this really safe medium to hang out and get a little carbs and don't do it. So the nuts in general are designed to mess up your gut. They're not meant to be digested by humans. And there's the worst ones with oxalate are almonds, cashews, and peanuts. Because peanuts, of course, are so ubiquitous in candies and used as a food, and people throw it in all kinds of recipes and in their smoothies.
But we can have things like, if you have nuts, you can have things like macadamias, walnuts, pecans. Are they okay?
They're all lower in oxalate. And so reasonable, small amounts. You just shouldn't use nuts as entrees. Nuts are garnishes and flavorings and special treats. They're not easily digested. So if you have a lot of pain and inflammation, they're just going to aggravate pain and inflammation. But if you're in good health, certainly you can use those things, but quit thinking them of it as a meal. And with our keto mentality right now, people are turning nuts into bars and mixes. You can go to Costco and buy in mega containers any one of like 15 versions of combinations of nuts and chocolate with some dried fruit thrown in it. And people start carrying that in their car and snacking while driving and living on it. Is it because we're lazy?
Absolutely. Totally agree. Next one is seeds.
Seeds. Yeah. Seeds and nuts are same thing. Hard on your gut. Most of the seeds are less horrible in terms of oxalate content, and there's some that are very low. Pumpkin seeds are very low in oxalate. Good if you're sprouting them, but just make sure they really agree with your digestion. Sunflower seeds aren't too bad, but hemp and chia seeds, big bad news.
I was surprised. Like when I heard you say that, I was like, what, chia seeds? Before I was carnivore, I used to have so much chia seeds. And then, because you're just told, like, chia puddings and all these different things. It's the worst. It's really bad.
It's really bad. And it's sad because people are promoting it so much and pushing this forward, and everybody's believing each other that that's okay to do.
Next one, beans.
Beans. The true beans, the black beans, the white beans that we used to make, like the Boston baked beans and all kinds of things. Horrible, high oxalate and full of lectins, very hard on the gut issues. If you have gut problems, beans don't belong in your diet. But the peas, the chickpeas, the green peas, the black-eyed peas, or cowpeas, you call them sometimes, those are pretty low in oxalate. So there's room for that, which is helpful because for people who are plant-based, they need somewhere to go for some food to eat. And so those would be good if you properly soak them to deal with the lectins, which is another anti-nutrient. In plants, you need a 3-day soak and a high pressure cook heat to really make those safe to eat.
Okay, next one is fruits.
Fruits. Now, the oxalates in fruits are heavily in the insoluble crystal side of things. So when you juice the fruit and you remove the pith and the pulp and stuff, you end up with a pretty low oxalate food. So the fruit juices, like pomegranate, is pretty high in oxalate with all that seeds and skin with the little arrows. But when you turn it into juice, you can have a cup and it's about 10 milligrams of oxalate, which is relatively not so bad. So the fruits, some are pretty terrible. Star fruit can kill you, including the star fruit juice, but most people don't have that here. But in other countries, star fruit and star fruit juice are like spinach smoothies. It's the magic elixir. So they're trouble. But blackberries are probably the worst fruit, and maybe raspberries as a second, and kiwi. Kiwi, I'd stay away from kiwi.
And it's the seeds that are in these fruits, even in vegetables, well, the roots in vegetables, that are the problem, right?
Well, the seeds add to the problem. The oxalate crystals, like in the kiwi, there's these rapide crystals, which are shaped like double pointed toothpicks, very sharp, uber tiny, little glass toothpicks, come in bundles of hundreds of them in the cells. And those are especially concentrated around the seed because you can think of that as a fortress with all these spears protecting the seed so that the spears help prevent you from breaking down that seed so the seed can travel through you and you can remove it in your fecal matter and plant it out there in the world for the sake of the kiwi tree or vine. It's really a vine. And the rapides are there as the white soldiers protecting the seed. So yeah, it's around the, but see, you can see when you juice things, something like these rapide crystals, which are in these vacuoles, can be partially removed in the juicing. But if you throw the whole thing into your blender, like the Vitamix to make something with the kiwi, what you've done is you've opened up the vacuole and you've opened up all these little spears, and now they're just out there and they're going to get you versus in the little bubble of pectin or whatever the materials are there. So the more you juice and pulverize a food like kiwi, the more toxic it is for your gut.
All right, next one is turmeric and cumin.
Yeah, superfoods, right?
Well, I'm Indian, so that's everything that Indians have for spices.
Yeah, in fact, the Indian diet is probably the highest oxalate diet in the world because it is plant heavy and there's potatoes and spinach and all this turmeric and everything. So yeah, that's a real concern. You can use extracts with these foods, kind of like fruit juice is a bit of an extract from the fruit. When you make curcumin extracts that are in the supplements, there's almost no oxalate there anymore. So the whole root is where that oxalate is. But at Costco, what they'll sell you is this like half gallon of whole root turmeric because we're convinced that the whole thing has got to be better. But it's bad news. And you might be taking it because you have arthritis. And for some people, it seems like it's sort of working. There's a lot of mysteries to this.
So it doesn't work for arthritis. So turmeric is not good because turmeric has been known to be very anti-inflammatory.
That's what they say. And there probably is, and with any toxin, or challenge to the body, there can be an anti-inflammatory response because the body, when it's injured, tries to lower the pain and inflammation in your body so you don't suffer so much. There's lots of different mechanisms going on, which takes a lot of sophistication to try to understand. Sophistication that we as a species and as a set of scientists still don't have all the way. We think we know more than we often do. That's why it's so helpful to just really see in real life and real people when you start removing these foods, what happens. That's really telling because that's not theory anymore. That's just reality.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next one, which a lot of people have, tea.
Tea, black tea. The standard black tea is pretty high in oxalate. There's room for tea if you're taking out the sweet potatoes and the nuts and the spinach. There's room for some oxalate. And we use tea a lot as a way of keeping some oxalate in the diet. But if your background diet is always tea, always potatoes, and any occasional rhubarb pie, after that rhubarb pie, are you really sleeping that well? That's another one. Poor sleep could be a sign of oxalate problems.
So it's important to understand what is oxalate heavy, which is the rhubarb, the greens, and then something like tea doesn't mean that you can't have it ever.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. No problem for most people. But, some people like construction workers or people who work outside, they'll stop at the convenience mart and they'll get a half-gallon jug of tea and drink that all day long. No, don't do that.
Okay, let's talk about the last one, the worst oxalate food, chocolate. So an ounce and a half of dark chocolate has lots of oxalates in it.
Very bioavailable, meaning it moves easily into the bloodstream. Yep. So chocolate, they use it in studies, and you can see how quickly it absorbs. And even with calcium added to that challenge test, you still get a significant spike in oxalate, especially about 4 hours after eating the chocolate. And if you're using cocoa powder and hot water and making a hot cocoa, that's a great, great way to deliver oxalates into the body.
Okay, so it doesn't mean with this list of foods that you have to just stop everything. It's just to be mindful what foods have the most oxalates in it if you have the side effects or symptoms that Sally has mentioned. So people are going to be thinking, well, that's a long list. I can't eat anything. I'm depressed. I'm confused. I always see this about, oh, everything is bad. Let's talk about what you can eat and what is a good starting point. I think a great way is if somebody is thinking, okay, I have some symptoms. I want to, do a low oxalate diet. First question is, do you think a carnivore diet for 90 days is a good place to start?
Probably not. But some people get away with the carnivore diet nicely and don't have a problem going. But that's a radical shift. If you're eating smoothies and chocolate and occasional potato products and like your fruits, you are going from high daily exposure to nothing. And the body is pretty wise. It's watching what you're doing. It's sensing what you're doing. It knows there's a lot of oxalate coming in. It's handling it. It's in this mode I call sequestration mode, where it's holding on to it, stashing it away, sticking it on the bed, sticking it in the attic, sticking it in the basement, hiding it so it's not there for company to see. So you won't notice how toxic you are, right? So that's what the body's been doing. And then there's no traffic at all. And there's silence in the hallways. The bloodstream is not continually being loaded from the gut with oxalate. And the liver's like not getting loaded from oxalate after every meal. The body's like, wow, ooh. And the kidneys are going, nice. And the tissues are going, look, the streets are open. And so here comes the attic and the basement and under the bed, thrown back out in this public spaces of the vascular system, your bloodstream, and it's moving around the tissues again and hitting the kidneys again. And so that's where you get into this idea of dumping. Like the body sees this clearing, this like quietness. It's not coming in. And it's like, thank goodness we can get rid of this. The eyes, the tendons, the neck, the back, the thyroid gland, the saliva glands. You're like, okay, let's clean up house. So you don't want that too eagerly. For some people, going straight into zero is such a sharp difference. The body's listening and ready. If you sneak out a little more slowly, that might work. Now, this is theoretical. We don't have science to show who benefits from this very slow, gradual approach versus who does okay on a sudden shift. We don't have any science because mainstream science is not paying attention to the fact that we have been sequestering oxalate, that 80% of us have it in our thyroid gland, that there's a huge amount of it in bones, and it's all invisible and hard to see. And it hasn't risen to a level of importance in science yet where they're bothering to characterize what's going on. So this is just based on best we can guess, based on real life. Some people do well on a carnivore diet for a year, a month, a couple weeks, and then stuff can happen. I've had people come to interview me from the carnivore community who say, I'm dumping oxalate. I just started. I've been on carnivore for 6 years, and now I can feel all this stuff happening, and I'm sick with this and that. And I have rashes and crystalline stools and cloudy urine, and I'm getting up to pee at night. I'm like, whoa, it took 6 years. So it's so variable, and that's well documented in the medical literature that oxalate toxicity shows up with all this variability. So there's not a good way to predict how your body's going to respond to this shift. So the general advice is to evaluate your own diet, find those top foods that you're eating too much of. For you, it might be almonds, it might be buckwheat. That's one we didn't mention. We forgot to mention all those sort of pseudo grains that the gluten-free people start using, like buckwheat, teff, quinoa. Quinoa's big superfood right now. They're really high in oxalate. They're very gut damaging, tough foods to be eating. You might start with the buckwheat or the quinoa. Get rid of that for a month, then get rid of the spinach, and then the almonds and so on. Almonds are bad news. I would probably start there. But so you would work on that in kind of a gradual way. And I want you to think of it as like not trying to wake the sleeping baby. So you set the baby in the crib, baby settled down and quiet, and you're tiptoeing backwards out of that bedroom and slowly shutting the door so that kid does not wake up and scream. And that's what you're trying to do with the oxalate.
And I forgot to mention previously when we talk about our worst oxalate foods, because even people might be thinking, okay, that's not too bad. But there are three things that people might be doing that could make oxalates worse as well, or overload oxalates. First one is the vitamin C.
Yeah, the vitamin C is fascinating because it accounts for a huge portion of what we call endogenous production. That is the body's production of oxalate. But it's really just that you're using so much vitamin C that you've got this precursor that becomes oxalate in the body. And the same thing happens with the sequestration. So you can be taking a lot of vitamin C and not feel the symptoms of it, not even have that much extra in the urine of oxalate showing up because the body is sequestering the oxalate from the vitamin C. Just taking vitamin C supplements alone consistently for years is enough oxalate burden in the body where you can be in trouble from just that. And again, this has been hard to characterize. It's been hard to study how this works. There's been some confusion about it. The vitamin C does readily get picked up by cells, and it's a good chance that some of that conversion into oxalate is happening inside of cells. So it's already in a place in tissues where it can be held onto because the cells really don't have a lot of permission to release the oxalate as long as it's high in the bloodstream, because that would blow out your bloodstream, blow out your heart. You'd end up with arrhythmias, maybe a heart attack. It would blow out your kidneys. So the cells are sort of obligated to hold on to it because they really need the heart. They really need the kidneys. So they're okay. Well, okay, I'll hold this for you, bud. Okay, I got it for you. And they're holding on to it. And then you quit the C and you quit the spinach and you quit the this. And now those cells are like, oh, good, finally a chance.
So another thing which was interesting was thiamine deficiency, B1. Why could that cause more oxalates in the body?
Right, because in this process of molecules becoming oxalate in your metabolism, you need vitamin B1 to move these other precursors that come before. There's several molecules that start changing from one to the next that end up as oxalate. And the vitamin B1, the thiamine, will take that final precursor and turn it into non-toxic compounds. And those non-toxic compounds your body can deal with. Without the B1, you end up with more oxalate created from the precursors. Low thiamine creates other forms of inflammation that adds to the production of those molecules that become oxalate. So you get more of those precursors in the liver especially, and you have less ability to shunt them off to a less toxic direction. So that can really double up on you, the low thiamine. It doubles up on, more precursors to oxalate and more oxalate from more precursors. So it has this multiplying effect where you really can up your quote endogenous production of oxalate from a deficiency in B1.
And the last other thing to think about, this was interesting, collagen supplements. Everybody is saying to take extra collagen supplements, but maybe we shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, because glycine seems to have some cool effects, but more importantly, hydroxyproline is one of these precursor molecules. That's the main molecule that becomes oxalate in the body. So when you turn over connective tissue, that's where you're doing this endogenous production. So you're adding more of that sort of connective tissue materials and increasing the oxalate in the body. So on top of any kind of toxicity going on with oxalates, you're adding more precursor, you're just making things worse. And I've had people who, once they quit the collagen, they've had their pain and arthritis go away, which is ironic because often they're taking it for that very problem.
If you take a collagen like protein powder, is that something as well?
Yeah, so you would tolerate a couple teaspoons of that a day, but people are taking like 4 tablespoons. It's way too much. But if you're on a low oxalate diet, there's a little more room for that. So say in a carnivore diet where you're eating more animal foods and getting more connective tissues, there's plenty of room to tolerate that if you get rid of all the other stuff. So, but it's worth knowing because then you can really think better and experiment with your own body, how much of that you really tolerate. And do you really need it? If you're on a carnivore diet, hopefully you're eating the tendons and the connective tissue and the fat that has that. You're eating the skin on the sardines, which is loaded with collagen, and your fish skin. There's lots of places to get it in your diet, which is excellent to do. You don't want to restrict eating those connective tissues. I don't think you need to. Even some broth, which is another gelatin source, a couple cups a day is probably okay, but drinking a quart a day, too much.
So you mentioned on another podcast, I think, that you tried a carnivore diet, like 100% carnivore diet, and then it worked and then it didn't work for you.
Yeah, April 1st, 2019, I quit the lemons and the coconut and just went carnivore. And it was interesting because it showed me that had developed kind of a sensitivity to lemons, which are important to help people not get oxalate stones in the body. It helps the body remove oxalates. It helps lower the acidity from all this inflammation and so on. And, it's pretty fun to go carnivore because it simplifies your life. It's pretty easy to do day in and day out. You don't need 3 meals anymore. You usually do fine on 2. But that's all, it's all flexible and negotiable. But I started to get thick in the middle. Like I lost my curve. Like I lost my waist. I started getting like butch looking and tired a lot and was having muscle cramps. The main thing that had me realize I had to have carbs was I could not cure these leg cramps at night that was ruining my sleep. And which for me was probably low muscle glycogen. So your muscles and liver need this sugar material in them for them to keep working when you're not eating. They need to have some energy available. And so that low energy from the low muscle glycogen was keeping me up at night. And I was also just bolt straight up, awake at night. My body's like, go get some food. Go. Like, it was, I think, causing hypoglycemia and just a general energy deficit in the body for me. And by adding some simple sugary carbs in small amounts, it makes a huge difference for me, and improves my energy and athletic performance and sleep. And I think it helps with the metabolism. I think starving yourself of carbohydrates slows your metabolism down. And by feeding the mitochondria some sugar, they're like having a party and getting energized, and like you're getting your youthful metabolism. It makes you kind of old if your metabolism is slowing down. It makes you cold. With sugar, I'm warm. The thyroid seems to like it. Everybody's happier with a little bit of carbs in my body. And that's, I think, for women especially true.
Okay, I'm thinking about my audience just listening to this because they're mostly carnivore, keto, low carb. So when you say sugar and carbs, how much are we talking about per day?
Well, I like to use coconut water, and we'll get 25 to 30 grams of carbs from that. And I will sometimes use a very clean ginger ale and get another 20 from that. I generally think like if I can get at least 12 to 15 with a meal of carbs, that keeps me pretty happy. Depends on if I'm working out. I think the carbs help me working out and recovery from working out. It kind of depends on the activity of the day. And I think it's helpful to like vary it a lot too. Like there's no strict rules about it. If you really nice thing about getting rid of the toxicity is that your body starts to speak in a language you're starting to understand, and you can respond to your needs. And so the big problem is with oxalates, I have so many food sensitivities now because of this immune system torturing I've been doing for decades and decades. And then this whole oxalate recovery continues to work the immune system to get rid of all these oxalates from your tissue. You're still in a situation where immune effects are still possible. And some of us, one of the side effects of the continuing clearing is that our sensitivities to food can get worse, not better. They get better for a while, and then hopefully that's not too common, but it's happened to me and a few of my clients. And so I don't have a lot of options for carbs. I'm allergic to all the fruits and the grains.
I just wanted to, I guess, clarify that because I think a lot of people that, maybe they're on a ketovore, carnivore diet because they're trying to deal with the insulin resistance. But obviously, if you have damage from decades of eating the wrong foods, including, say, potato chips and maybe some vegetables here and there, but there's a lot of overload of toxicity. And so to say, when somebody makes statements around I eat carbs, I just like to clarify because what you just said is about it's still classified as a low carb diet.
Some people believe in carb cycling, and I kind of think that's a good idea for many people. And it's just so important to customize with all of this. And that's why people come to me for individual counseling, because everybody needs a very customized approach. And at different stages of the game, different things are going to work better than others. So it's really important to not throw out a lot of hard and fast rules. I never like to do that for anybody. I don't want anybody to copy what I do, because what I do is just this twisted, you know the game Twister? You have to twist yourself in whatever way is working for you at this stage at 60, where I've done decades and decades and decades of damage. What I would like to see happen is people recognize that this can be a problem for anyone, and prevention is the best thing. Let's not load up your children with sweet potatoes and chocolate and potatoes. It's simple.
Absolutely. So if somebody is now talking about the excretion process, so they've got something that they want to excrete all the oxalates, they need to do a low oxalate diet. So for a month, pick the worst food, say for example, it's spinach or almonds, get rid of that for 1 month, and then keep going until you've simplified your diet. What should those foods look like in terms of a low oxalate diet for maintenance?
Yeah, well, again, it depends on what you tolerate and what your food philosophy is and what you like, but you should really center a diet on protein, animal foods with protein and fat, with plenty of fat. Women do really well on butter and lard and these animal fats. If you tolerate eggs, great. If you tolerate dairy, great. But animal flesh that's fatty, that includes the connective tissue, cooked foods that have the bone in them, and use the juices. I just recently cooked a pork roast slow in the oven all day 2 days ago. And I have this jar of 1 cup of the broth that was excreted from the pork roast that I can't wait to drink. Is a delicious, it's already salted and flavorful. I didn't throw that out and waste that. That's full of potassium and nutrients and flavor. And I will be eating that as that's like the whole animal kind of approach, eat the fat in it, eat the connective tissue in it. If you get something with the skin on it, do that whole food. Animal fats and animal proteins are healing. They provide, creatine and all kinds of stuff that really helps you heal. So you need that energy to rebuild your bones and your muscles and to feel well and get back to the vital person you're meant to be. So that's key if you can get there. Some people are not ready to eat meat because they've been vegetarian and vegan and hold on to that philosophy. And as they start to get the toxicity gone, that emotional timidness starts to crack, and their willingness to jump into a more nutritious diet opens up later.
Let's say that somebody is following a meat-based diet, all the good foods, some vegetables, low oxalate vegetables on the side. What happens if they get those symptoms of oxalate dumping? What should they be do in that situation?
Right. So the dumping is a term for when the oxalate deaccumulation process gets extreme and starts making you really sick, with really itchy rashes, with severe headaches, with panic attacks, with really crystalline urine or crystalline stools, or, mouth pain. You can have tooth and sinus pain, all kinds of stuff, buzzing ears, you name it. If it's disrupting your life, ruining your sleep, that we want to calm that down. We don't want the immune system and the tissues that toxic, because basically you're toxic. The tissues have dumped it into the bloodstream. It's moving around, and that is dangerously toxic. So you have to add back oxalate into the diet, because there's this, as the body's holding on to it when it can and then releasing it when it can. So now you're telling it, oh, quit releasing it. By eating it, that says it back into more of a sequestration mode of, oh, people got to hold on to it. Let the blood rest, let the kidneys rest. You got to hold on to it. So you have to eat enough to turn off those symptoms. And if you've eaten enough, say at dinner time, enough oxalate, within an hour, you'll be like, oh yeah, crisis over, feel better. So if you're not getting through that crisis moment, you're not eating enough oxalate. There's not a specific number. It's whatever amount works for your body. How hard it hit. Yeah, like sometimes it's a cup of tea and you're great. And sometimes it's an entire sweet potato, which is a lot of oxalate. That whatever amount the body needs, okay, quit the releasing, like stop, go into sequestration mode, stop. You need to get that ask loud enough. And for some people, literally 1 cup of tea and 20 minutes later, they're like, okay, I'm better. Now, another side effect of all this inflammation and damage and deaccumulation is acidity. So you may want to check your urine pH and make sure you're not super acid all the time. If you are, you need to do alkalization. The lemons are great for that. citric acid. Minerals are great for that. The citrate, calcium citrate and so on. Bicarbonates, Alka-Seltzer Gold. There's alkalizing, supplements available. You may want to be containing that, because when your system is really stressed and highly inflamed, it raises the general acidity. That's what really contributes to that insulin resistance and metabolic derangements and propensity to cancer development, is this chronic acidity. So you want to check that too, and that'll help you feel better, because feeling acid tends to make you feel foggy and overwhelmed and a little bit not up to your life. Like, life feels hard when you're acid. So manage that acidity, get the electrolytes back in, because as you're removing oxalic acid, this metal chelator, you're removing potassium and calcium and probably other minerals from your body. You're already mineral deficient from years of a high oxalate diet. You need more calcium, you need more electrolytes, you need more salt. And as you're releasing them over the years and you're deaccumulating, you're continuing to drain minerals out of the body. So we need to pay attention to the minerals, because if you don't, you could end up with arrhythmias and end up in the emergency room with what feels like a pending stroke or heart attack, because it's tough to be low in calcium. This hypocalcemia in the blood makes the nerves not function and the muscles not function. So you get this, the heart starts struggling.
Absolutely. It sounds like the treatment is, the same as, I guess, treating any kind of disease, but just certain foods that you have to focus on, especially if you want to eliminate the oxalates. The hard part is that when the dumping happens and it's too fast clearance, and you just have to be able to manage that. But you can always buy Sally's book, Toxic Superfoods, and that's going to be linked in the description down below, so you can go purchase it. But Sally, I want to say a big thank you for your time. I think this has been an encyclopedia about oxalates and oxalate dumping and how people can have optimal health. So if people want to find you more, how can they reach you?
Please reach out to us at my website, sallyknorton.com. If you look around hard enough, you will find a shop there where you can get a cookbook and you can get the data book. There's a way to sign up for group classes there. There's lots of free information there, free downloads, and there's a way to email us and let us know what's going on with you.
I hope you enjoyed this interview. Now you need to watch this video next with Dr. Shawn Baker, all about the ultimate guide to start the carnivore diet. I'll see you guys next week.